and I'm so grateful, especially to Ronnie and Jim, who I would just say this is LADCO world. This is not a design center. This is a world, and I am exhausted from touring it. I mean, and stimulated. And Emily, thank you too for all you've done to make tonight possible. And I also, all of the Century team, especially John and Comer, y'all are the best. And I'm just so grateful to be tapped to come and get to extract the treasure from this amazing talent. So I hate that Jim read that quote because I had that down. I was gonna, do y'all want to hear it again?
Yeah.
It's really good, right? Antiques show their age and history, blemishes and all. That kind of imperfection is a lovely thing to live with because it's so forgiving. It's just what I want to come home to. I love that. And I have that written down because I feel the same way. But I'm going to back up a little bit and try to get some intro, go back to your roots, and figure out how you got started in interior design.
Well, you know, it's one of those happy accidents. I fell in love with furniture, and I used this wholesale philosophy to sell to the trade, and I started bringing in containers from Europe into the city of New Orleans. I just moved there in '94. I was trying to figure out how to furnish my own home. And I just bought my first Victorian. I was mesmerized by the history of the city, and I was enamored with one-offs, things that I started seeing when I was antique shopping, and I thought, how in the world am I going to furnish my home? It's going to be monumental financially. And I thought, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to head off to Europe, and I'm going to buy a container. And I was in the apparel industry, and I decided I would use that apparel formula to the furniture business. I'm going to just sell it to the trade. So I spent all of my money except one house note on a 20-foot container of furniture. And I shipped it into the Port of New Orleans, and at that time I started in a 10 by 30 mini storage on Chapatulas. If anybody's been to New Orleans, that's the last street before the river. I shipped it in there, and you know, we didn't have IG back then. It was word of mouth, and I told designers and antique dealers that I was bringing in this container. And as I was in there that morning, my friends helped me unload the container. We set it up in the mini storage, and I was in there, Margot, at 6 in the morning praying, because I thought, have I just created a 20-foot container garage sale? What, you know, who is going to show up to buy this furniture? Well, they showed up, and everything sold in 10 minutes. And I did not have a bank bag, and people literally wrote checks back then. They would give you checks, I put it in my jean pocket. And I thought, you know, I might be on to something here. This could be a business, maybe. And I just started spending more and more time in Europe. And I got a call one day from Veranda Magazine, and they said, we've heard about you, could we come over? I said, well, I'm unloading a container today, and please, you know, just stop by. At that time, I was at the Port of New Orleans in a old cotton warehouse where they used to unload cotton. So I had no bathroom, I had no lights, I had to borrow electricity from my neighbor. And so they pull up, and they're looking around. I'm covered in Excelsior and packing material. It's just me and the guys. And they called me later, and they said, do you mind, while we're in town, could we come see your home? Now I was in my second Victorian. I said, certainly. So I got a call then the following day, and they said three things. Number one, we want to shoot the warehouse. We also want to shoot your home, but we want to know if you would be a contributing editor to Veranda. And basically, I had to lie down on my kitchen floor. I had to be out in the kitchen, I hung the phone, and I'm like, that's what has just happened.
I thought you were going to say I had to lie, but no. I think basically I had to lie. No. Lying down is better than lying.
I had to lie down on my kitchen floor. And so what happened was, it made the cover of Veranda, and I was such a green pickle. They sent me the magazine, and I called them back and I said, you are so kind to mock this up for me, to show me what this could look like. So remember, I love furniture. That was my story. And I got a call right after the magazine came out. And it was a Sunday. I had to lie on my kitchen floor again because it was Harry Connick Jr. and Jill Goodacre. And they said, we're in town. We had the Veranda magazine. We want to come over. And I'm like, all right, please. And they came over. I did after I got up off the kitchen floor, and they said, we want you to create what you did here in our home in Connecticut. So I tried to explain to them that that wasn't really my bandwidth, that I was busy in Europe, because when I would be in Europe now, because that was a full-time job, I would be there 5 weeks at a time. And then I'd ship the container in, and we'd turn that container, and I'd be back in Europe, maybe a month after that, after the unloading sale. So, but they could have convinced me to do anything, and they convinced me to do that. And the job that followed that was Emerald and Alden Lagasse, the chef, and I knew Alden from when I first moved to New Orleans. We got to be friends. And so I worked on 3 projects for them that then made it into Shelter magazines. And so it was like a happy accident.
I love that. You didn't set out to be an interior designer.
No, I tried to convince them that I could not do that.
And that's so counterintuitive, because usually people are trying to convince us that they can't. So I sort of love that. I gotta say, if Harry Connick asked me to do his house, I'm not a designer, but I would fake it. And I would use all your stuff. All this stuff. And I would come to LADCO world. Absolutely. And it'd be done. That's right. Wow, that is so interesting. Well, so I just came from a show house in Nashville that Flower put on, and Tara and Century were so gracious and lovely as to participate. And some, like that shot right there is Tara's room in the show house. And I know that sofa sold, right?
Right.
I mean, we had QR codes, y'all. People could just buy with their phones. I want that sofa. I want that Gustavian daybed. And is that a centerpiece, the Gustavian daybed?
Yes.
It's from your new collection.
It's the Maximilian. Yes.
I love that, because one of the things that I was talking to Jim about earlier is just this reawakening of people to the value of classical design and antiquity. And of course, you never went away from it. But I really love how you've folded it into your more transitional and contemporary pieces in your collection of Century. Can you talk about how you curate that? Because there's an art to it. It can go badly awry.
Well, if you read the book, it's called A Hero. I love to anchor a space with a hero, something that is unexpected, that is time honored, that is going to, it's never a trend, it's a classic, and I build around that. So the perfect partnership was Century because we could make this sexy, comfortable upholstery with Century, sexy, comfortable upholstery in Hickory, North Carolina, and we could turn that in 4 to 6 weeks, which is like a designer's dream for me, because I don't have clients that want to wait 6 months or whatever for upholstery, and so I would anchor with the hero. I would work around it with European-inspired upholstery, Margot, that's reinterpreted for the American market. And then we would layer back into that with mid-century pieces and just like the coffee table in front of the Maximilian.
I love that coffee table. Can you talk a little bit about, it's like a lacquered, the white one, is that the one you're talking about?
Well,
No,
that's another coffee
another.
table,
That's
right,
another.
that's another one. But this one, we use, the St. Croix is, it's really a mid-century that was found.
Right there.
Yes, that was found in the field as, let's say, a 36 by 36, but elongated for century to fit in front of big seating. And all the stones are honed marbles throughout the collection, whether it's on a credenza or a coffee table, just that silent luxury.
Silent luxury, what a great term. Did you make that up?
No, I'm sure I've heard that somewhere, and I love
I
it.
don't use it.
Okay.
I love that. Oh, it's great. I love it. Because I have to say, neither of us are very silent. And so I so love that term that you appreciate that silent luxury. And so that leads me to ask a little bit, talk about quiet. Your palette, pretty much black and white. Are you, a little bit of brown, a little bit of neutral. Talk about the genesis of that, because I don't know you that well, and I'd like to know.
Well, I have always been attracted to neutrals. I just find them calming, relaxing, exactly what I want to come home to. When a client says they want to work in color, I am certainly going to, hear what they say. But I like the history of Versailles, those pale grays and sepia browns, Brunei. So a lot of times I'm just reverting back to my history and the palettes that I've seen all throughout Europe. Now I incorporate organic materials with that, and the interesting thing about this high point is I worked in a lot of brown mohairs and velvets, and really I don't use much pattern, but I use a lot of textural fabrics, and I love that about Century because it looked glamorous, it anchored the space, it was very warm, and I'm that attracted, and maybe those are the clients that are attracted to me. Although when you look at Palm Beach in this photo, there's a lot of color there, but that's really an art.
The art has the color. Yeah, which I think is fun to have those accents of color, and you have the canvas of the neutrals. So I was looking earlier at your collection, and the shieldback chairs. Those are straight up Sheraton shieldback chairs, English furniture that you have reproduced with a refreshing sort of twist. Thank you, first of all. And second of all, can you talk a little bit about just kind of the origin of, I think I'm going to do a shieldback chair, because you don't see those that much except in older homes. or museums or house museums.
Right, so this chair originally was Italian, but you know, furniture travel, that's what I love. I mean, and you know, countries would borrow from other countries. So Sweden would borrow all their styles from Louis XIV, and
Everybody
you know,
borrowed from
everybody
each
was sharing and re-envisioning that. But what I loved about the Showback chair was it was timeless, you know, neoclassical, plays well with contemporary and traditional.
And it's playful. It has a little smile to it. You know, it's different and interesting. And so again, thank you for that. So this is a weird question, but your love of history is so prevalent and so obvious. Can you pick an era that you would live in if you could go back and tell us why?
Goodness. You know, I'm going to say the Renaissance, only because it was the birth. There was so much creativity happening during then, whether you were a painter or a sculptor. It's almost like it was, they were liberated. They were, you know, coming from Louis XIII in straight lines into this magical world of creativity. And they had all these patrons that were paying artists.
We need those now.
To be creative. And I would totally go back to the Renaissance. Not only that, I mean, just their attire. Now, what do you want to put on some flowing something, you know?
So talk about forgiving.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so not to get too sort of businessy, but can you share with us how you decided to align with Century and their stable of very talented, illustrious designers? How did that happen?
So, I created my own furniture line with 46 items. I ended up and it grew to about 200 items. I ended up licensing about 70 to 80 of those items to another company. And after I did that, I put my head down for a year and I wrote the book, Soul of the Home. And I got called to High Point to a book signing at the Antique and Design Center, and I decided I'd go a day early and just look around. Since I had a showroom in New Orleans, I wanted to see what was happening in High Point. I hadn't been there in a minute. And so I was all dressed up in paper bag pants and Birkenstocks, just flopping around.
But black and white.
No, I had on orange with a white pant, yes, with the neutral Birkenstock. Yeah. So, I do love orange. But, so I happened to be in the steel building and I looked up and it said Century, and I had done a show house in LA with Windsor Smith. And I remember, now Windsor licensed with Century, and then I know Thomas O'Brien was there, and you know, I just did great just incredible designers, and I thought I would walk in my paper bag pants and ask to see the president. Well, I did, and their secretary, Angie, said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm just here for a book signing." You know, and I figured she would come back and she would say, "Do you have a business card? They're all busy." And I would say, "No, I don't have a business card," and that would be the end of that. So, but she came back and she said, "He'll be with you in 5 minutes. He's with someone." So I told Comer and John and all the team this story so many times. I see 3 men walking toward me smiling. And I thought,
That's always a good sign.
that is a good sign right there. And it was so wonderful. That one said I had the book, the other said I'm familiar with the furniture line. And, you know, they said, can we take you to dinner? I said, no, I'll come back at 5 after I'm through flopping around the market. And we just sat and talked, and it was like we had been friends forever. And so 2.5 years after that, I had the collection launch last October.
Love those stories. It sounds a little bit like you have just been in the right place at a right time. You've had a really strong nudge to do something, and it's worked out. It doesn't sound. Have you worked at all? I know you work hard. I'm kidding, but it does seem like you've had kind of a strawberry serendipitous.
Well, life, you know, it was so funny because my manager, who's been with me since the 90s, Linda Hall, I said to Linda on the way to High Point, I said, Linda, I might go and I might talk about licensing. And she's like this, oh, that's great. And you know, it's a casual conversation. I find myself standing in front of Century. And then when I get in the elevator, Margot, Lauren Daigle is singing I Believe. And I called Linda. I said, now Linda, Lauren Daigle's singing I Believe in the elevator, and I believe I might have a licensing. And so, you know, we just went on about our normal, you know, I'm in the fields in Europe, so there's nothing easy about that portion or unloading containers or whatever. So no, it wasn't, you know, I thought it was an organic story in design, and it was very organic with Century. And what I find is, you know, just all these years of hard work, because I work hard all my life, I just love that. And I love to work, and I get a lot of validation from that. And making other people happy, really seeing those things in design projects and being a designer's designer just is very validating for me. But what I find is, if you try to make something happen and it's difficult, it will always be difficult. You're going to have to maintain that, and it'll be a hard ride. But you know, when the door opens and you walk through the wall of fear and it just starts to flow, that's when I say you're on the right path. So I quit trying to really make a door open, kick a door open, and then you have to maintain the door being open. I'm just, yeah.
That's so inspiring to me, because I have learned in 20 years that if you have to force something or somebody, I can't tell you, for the first few years I was force or massage gently, but talk somebody into coming to one of my panels or being in one of our shows or whatever. And if I had to really talk them into it, it never was a happy experience. You know, they would do it because I just pressed them or whatever. But I love the image of not kicking in the door, but walking through it and walking through that wall of fear, because it takes courage what you've done. I mean, it does. And you faced the fear of failure, and you've been wildly successful. And I'm so honored to be sitting on the stage today. My
Sister, I know we are. So when Margot Shaw calls you to be in the Showhouse, you know, it was like getting the call from Harry and Jill. I'm like this, how could you tell her no?
I'm so glad that you didn't, and I received that. Speaking of Showhouses, I know we don't have much time left, but can you talk a little bit about why you like to do a Showhouse?
Well, first of all, I did the Showhouse only because you called and asked me to do it. I mean, I could literally, I don't like doing Showhouse. Let's say that. But, you know, when Margot calls, when Margot calls, I was walking in Auburn Park one morning with my husband and my dog, my whippet, and sister, uncreative sister. So I hung up the phone and he's like, "What did you just do?" I said, "Oh, Margot's doing a show house in some city and I'm gonna go." And he was like, "Okay."
Better find out which city.
So, and it was so cute because Hannah, raise your hand. Okay, Hannah is a design assistant, works with me, goes to all these events. I'm so proud of her. She's also in school at the New York School of Design at night, online. So she had never done one, and she's like, "Oh, this is going to be so much fun." I said, "You know what? I'm going to let you install that. That is so much fun for you."
She did a fabulous
She
job.
did. She did an excellent job.
People really loved your space. People talked about, the whole house was pretty, and I thought, and we got such amazing feedback. But there's certain spaces that people come away talking about more. Yours was one of them, and also you, because this one stayed on site for 3 days, which is, talk about a hero. That was amazing, and got to engage with people, got to engage with you. But is there a place where in a show house you try, obviously you use new collection. What was your response? What were people talking about to you about your collection?
I love this because it was really a takeaway for me. Because when you're working in a large-scale room like this living room that doesn't really feel intimate, and Suzanne was my hero here because she connected me to Paul Montgomery for the wallpaper, the beautiful sea view wallpaper that really helped the space have this warmth and intimacy, the backdrop of Europe. Have a perfect partner, of course, Century. Work with one-offs, which is, my wheelhouse. But I think what I loved hearing over and over again, people would come back and come back and come back into the room, and they would say, "We can't figure out what we love about this room, but we love this. This feels so comfortable to us. I could live in this room." And so just before we flew out on the third day, we had these young realtors from Belmead. It was a group of 3 guys who were like in their 30s. And they came back and they said, "We don't know what this is, but we want this. We all want this for all of our homes." And I'm thinking,
We don't want to hear that.
I'm thinking now, Hannah, that was like the cherry. There it was. They're 30 years old. They are big residential realtors in Belmead, and they don't know what they like about it, but they want to recreate it.
Did you point them to the QR code? You can have this. Well, I know that we wanted to allot some time for questions, but I just am so grateful that you were willing to spend some time with me and to share with us about. Thank you for saying yes to the show house. Y'all, just a little shameless self-promotion. The show house will be in our March-April issue of Flower Magazine, so please do subscribe or buy it or whatever, and you can see Tara's room and 22 others.
Yes,
It was a beast, but it was fabulous. So anyway, thank you so much. Does anybody have questions for Tara? Yes, ma'am. We've got a mic coming your way.
I'm wondering when did you first start? What was the date?
1994.
Do you remember me? I'm from New Orleans.
I do.
was at one of your first I'm sure I was at the warehouse opening on Chalk too.
Yes.
And I've been following you ever since.
I do.
So congratulations on your success. It's amazing.
Thank you.
And your style and your taste is just, it was always great, and it's just gotten so big and so creative. It's terrific. I just want to say that.
Anybody else?
Have you found your dream house in the south of France yet?
I haven't, but thank you for following. We made an offer on a house 4 kilometers from Ile-sur-Sorgue, and it was an 18th century mosque. We had looked at this house, and my husband, one Saturday, I said, "Hey, you want to go in halves with me on that house?" He's an attorney, and he should have been an antique dealer, but he loves going on these trips with me. And he said, "Oh yeah." So we got a number in our heads, and I called the realtor, and we had looked at this house. It was surrounded by 4 hectares of apple trees. Now that sounds absolutely romantic, doesn't it? Organic apple trees. And the realtor had said the farmers will come and they'll service these apple trees 7 times a year. I'm thinking 7 times a year. That's so easy breezy. So we go back to look at the house because the owner of the house countered our offer. And the farmer was there with his farm hands. And I said, "Now, are you coming 7 times a year?" And he said, "No, I'm here 3 times a week." And I said to my husband, "Now get in the car because gravel's gonna fly when I peel out." Because I just see 3 new dependents on the paper right here. So tomorrow I will know if this house we have looked at 3 times. It is not my dream house, but it has great light, and it's unique, and it's in a little town called Fontaine de Vaucluse. We'll know tomorrow if the offer they have on that house is going to fall through. And if it does fall through, and the reason we never made the offer on it because it wasn't really my dream house, but then the more I look at houses in Europe, the more I find they all have some type of issue. Goats next door, farm machinery that belongs to a farmer that's right next to your property that is not art. And so we'll see. I'm still on the journey, because I want to have a home in Europe.
And tomorrow would be a really fun day to hear that you get that house since it's her birthday. Go ahead.
I have a question. I'm curious how I know it's probably organic in all aspects, but how do you practice such restraint with antiques and modern furniture? How we perfectly juxtapose?
Oh, goodness. I think just like when we're setting up the High Point showroom, a lot of times you're working in CAD. And then when you're laying it as it evolves, I feel it's organic. It does speak to you, and you'll say, "Oh, that's really not the perfect cocktail table for that. Really, I feel it needs that." But I think it's really the weaving of the tapestry. It's the journey on it. It's the anchor piece that sets it in. You're going to work around that. If I'm using an antique there, then I'm going to work around that with a balance. That'll be a good balance in contemporary. And then I'll layer in, because who doesn't love like a collectible mid-century? I'll layer that back through. But I feel like you're working it like you're writing a poem. It works itself out.
I know that Paris is a mecca for like but are there any other underrated cities that you just love to go to?
Oh my gosh. I love a dévalage, which is a fair in a field. And so you have to find out where those fairs are. So there are a lot in the south of France that are near Avignon. It's only a 3-hour train ride from Paris. Then you pick up a car and you drive to these fairs. The one thing about those fairs, it is like this. If you're not on it and you hesitate, somebody behind you, if it's really good, is going to take that piece. So I've learned the lesson the hard way. I normally don't regret the things I've purchased, but I do regret the things I didn't pull the trigger on. But you can find all these things with shippers. They'll have a list of fairs. And if you go north, you can go toward Normandy, which is like Chartres, Le Mans, and all these little places that have those dévalages. But you have to remember, it is really a rapid sport.
Great.
Tara, I got a question. Tell us about the piece that got away.
A great question.
Oh boy. It was an 18th century chandelier from an antique dealer in Toulouse. Her name is Laura Badeau. And I was young and importing, and I felt like it was too expensive to sell to the trade. And I thought, well, I'm going to walk and I'm going to come back around and I'll make a lower offer. That did not happen because somebody knew it was good and it was gone. So I learned this big lesson from Laura's Fabulous Things. And I also learned you get into a relationship with people in Europe, for me, that have great things because they have an eye. You know, the eye is trained. And I believe design is in the DNA. So, and birds of a feather flock together, right? So all those seem like just catchphrases, but they're really not. Because, you know, if you're sharing the same love of things, then you need to be friends with those people because they're going to have things and bring in things that are going to be more your taste. I mean, sometimes I've gone to Europe and gone to dévalages and I'm thinking, you need to keep your family warm by burning that wood because it is so bad. But so yes, you better learn the vibe of your tribe and stick close to your tribe.
Well, and I love, y'all follow Tara if you don't, because on Instagram, she'll have these videos, these reels, where she'll just walk you through her process and introduce you to different people, different friends, and well, they are friends, but, and you really kind of just unfold your process. It's great, really interesting.
In the last chapter of the book, I give you my cities that I shop in Europe and why I shop there and what they're known for and the dévalages and how I negotiate. Because I thought I wanted to write this book. If I had this book available when I started importing, you talk about cut to the chase. But I've had people in the fields in Europe, like husbands and wives, that say, I've torn out the last chapter and we've gone to all these fairs and we're filling a container. So to me, that's validation because I thought, you know, I could keep those sources to myself or I could openly share them because, you know, you're really not in competition with anybody. You're running your own race.
There's enough for everyone.
Yes.
Anybody else? Hey, Tara, thank you so much.
Margot, thank you.